Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
Bear down, Bears fans. The Thursday edition is here. Minicamp has come to a close, and apparently Justin Fields was cooking today. We got Courtney Cronin here to break that down for us. We're also going to talk about who stands out offensively, defensively. What are we seeing from the rookies? All that more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears Podcast. I am loving what I'm hearing out of Minicamp today. Courtney, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to know that this is the last time I'll be in Hallis Hall till the end of July. It's a nice break. I know players were skedaddling out of here. I saw a bunch of cars flying by at, normal speeds. But getting out of here because they know it's going to be a very short amount of time. Like it feels like, we'll get the training camp scheduled tomorrow, but it feels like the end of July is so far away, but everyone knows it's not. And you really only have like a week or two built in somewhere where if you're an NFL player, you can kick back on vacation, do nothing, go do business ventures, whatever you want to do before you have to start training, because it's not like these 5 weeks are all a vacation for NFL players. You got to stay in shape. And we heard from Matt Eberflus that today they went over the weight that they want every player to come back at. They talked about, making sure that you stay in shape to a specific degree to prevent soft tissue injuries. That was kind of the message to the team, making sure that those are not something that, pop up here in the break that they have between minicamp and training camp. But it'll be nice to, kick back for a little bit and hopefully have a little bit of a summer before you get into training camp. And it's roughly 25 straight weeks where you're going nonstop until the end of next season.
Yeah, I mean, it as fans, right? We're all excited, but when you're actually in the trenches, when you're out there doing the work, it can be a long season. Hopefully, not as long with as many losses.
First quarter.
We do got to talk about, let's start with yesterday, just so that we can figure this out. I saw Bears Twitter losing its mind because our teammate, Jeff Joniak, went on Waddle and Sylvia, I believe, and, said that Justin Fields had a pretty good day. McKee said he liked what he saw out of Justin Fields yesterday on the podcast. And then, we heard from other stations out there that Justin Fields looked bad. So you were there, you saw Justin Fields. What is your assessment of what we saw from Justin Fields yesterday? And then heading into today, how much of a difference did we see?
I think I saw the 15 of 18 stat that was out there floating around about what Justin Fields did. I believe it was in 7-on-7 yesterday. I was trying to find that, which is, an interesting stat to keep just because it is 7-on-7. There's no pass rush. There's really no pressure in your face. It's a passing drill. But I know that there's been some discrepancies. Like, is he really good right now? Does he look really bad? Like, honestly, Pat, and maybe I'm just too much of bring it down a notch type person, but this stuff doesn't matter right now. And I think the quote that I got from that I heard from Justin Fields today, when I asked him about, building that chemistry with DJ Moore, in taking a lot of deep shots, not only are both of them very proficient with the deep ball, like Justin Fields throwing it, DJ Moore catching deep passes and using his speed to be a vertical threat, that's all fine and dandy, but you got to take shots, and not every shot is going to fall complete. It doesn't matter, according to Fields, it doesn't matter right now if a pass is complete or not. It will in training camp because you're closer to the season, and you got to make sure that, is he running the right route? Is the quarterback releasing the ball at the right route depth? And syncing all those things up, the rhythm and timing and trust, you'll be able to tell those elements a little bit more clearly in 6-7 weeks. But right now, it's okay to not have great days. It's okay for the offense to be up and down, which by and large, the first 2 days of minicamp, those were my takeaways. There were some good moments from the offense, and there were some not so good moments from the offense. And yesterday was interesting because, Fields did throw, he threw a pick six, and Jaquan Brisker's the one who picked it off and, went opposite field. And that was, who knows what like it looks like though, because at this where, from where our vantage point is, that didn't stand out to me as, man, he really missed a read. He didn't go through his reads properly. Like it was the wrong throw. It's hard to tell. They're more clear-cut ones. Like there was an interception that Kyler Gordon had the other day.
Yeah.
That I think Cole Kmet either tripped up on the route. It looked like it was an overthrow, but it was meant for Cole Kmet, but it wasn't all on field. So take everything with a grain of salt right now. Yeah. It's okay for the offense to look like a work in progress. I just think that sometimes, when you have a losing season and you're telling the fan base, be patient, and you're saying, hey, this offense is going to come together, and you're being told one thing from the coaching staff and players, man, it's feel like it's clicking. The DJ Moore, Justin Fields connection is really good. All these other pieces are going to come into play. And then what you hear out of practice from people like myself who are there reporting it, and you can only report certain things, but in without going way into detail, because again, we only get to see, right now we're fortunate, we get to see all of practice, but eventually that will change. So you don't know all of which happens behind closed doors. And we got 3 days of minicamp. There were a lot more OTA practices that we weren't able to see than we were able to see. So it makes fans, I think, nervous when you hear, man, he had a rough day, because it's all right, well, when's the consistency going to come where you have a couple days in a row? And I go back to last year thinking how, during training camp, there was a one day the red zone period was so bad that even I was kind of me, Mrs. Rational, level-headed person on this, even I thought it was bad. And sometimes that's a sign of it's just not working. You need to fix some things. And sometimes it's just a bad day during training camp, during times where they're either in shells or they're in pads. And right now they're not in any of that. So I don't know what all of the hubbub was about yesterday. I wasn't paying too much of attention to it because, frankly, for my sanity, I'm out here enough. I don't need to dig through the depths of Twitter to see what Bears fan 12345 on Twitter is yelling into the void about. But I can understand people want to see this offense look better. People want to see the passing attack look competent this year. And sometimes when you hear, hey, it wasn't looking so good, then there's people are concerned about it. But I would say just relax. Today was a good, to end on a high note where it's not, man, I hope when we get back here in training camp, this thing comes together. Right. And to end at a place where the red zone offense looked good. Justin Fields looked accurate. Those are some tight window throws that he's going to have to fit on a more regular basis. And fortunately, you have some big body guys who could be on the receiving end of that. That's a confident place, not only for the team, but I think for fans to walk away for the next 5 weeks knowing, hey, when they get back in training camp, they have a place to pick up from.
Yeah, it's yesterday. That's just me fanning smoke. That's all that was. I'm not going to lie to you. I love the smoke. I was like, oh, that's we got smoke back and forth.
It creates conversation. The team's relevant. That's a better spot to be in if you're a Bears fan. People are talking about your team. And if the conversation is going on around your quarterback, then a team that it's meh. This is what you expect, because I think that stems from people not expecting that from Justin Fields. Yeah.
And I mean, what we've seen to this point, I feel like we've seen a lot more positive than negative. We saw today, right? That he apparently he looked a lot more dominant in the red zone, kind of getting the ball out there. When you're hearing what the coaches are basically gauging to this point, does it give that feeling of, okay, we are where we expected to be at this point going into training camp? We are, right, we're not behind schedule. We're actually maybe ahead of schedule in some places going into training camp.
Yeah, by and large, I think it's most places, except for, give or take the receivers that haven't been able to practice, which, it's that position because of Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney being sidelined with injury. And then, it's the cornerback spot too. I mean, Tyreek Stevenson looks like that guy. And I know that Eberflus was asked about it today, where he, did you want, he wants the cornerback spot to be solidified sooner rather than later. And now you have a chance with Tyreek Stevenson to get to check that box off. So those are important things. And I don't get the vibe from this team that it's man, we have so much work to do. Do they have work to do? Absolutely. And it's going to be considerable, but it's not like last year where you didn't know who your receivers were going to be because you had, a pretty mishmash group. And remember, it wasn't until like July. I mean, Dante Pettis was an offseason addition. Tajay Sharp was an offseason addition. Yeah. They traded for N'Keal Harry in July. Like the group is what they have right now. They just have to sort out what the roles are beyond the top three. And then, of course, the incomplete part of that is, how does Chase Claypool actually look with Justin Fields? Because we haven't seen it outside for one training camp or one OTA practice. That's still an unknown. But really, the only holes you can point at on this roster and say, are they going to do something or are they going to stand pat, is the defensive end position. And that's pretty much about it. I don't anticipate any other like major off-season moves, because they did a lot of that. They did the hard part and the heavy lifting back in March and April. And now they've got to take this roster, see if there's any way for them to get better. And there will be, like, at some point. But there's roster cuts, there's the waiver wire. All of that will play into this roster certainly looking different than it does now, 2 months from now. But as of right now, I think that they're in a comfortable spot that they're going into the break before training camp, knowing they're not going to have to start all over or start way behind the 8 ball come late July.
We heard yesterday a little bit on ESPN 1000 on the Waddle and Sylvie show from Sylvie that, doesn't seem like, Chase Claypool is where the Bears are expecting him to be. He's hearing that, they thought he would be further along. They thought he would be more into this process. They're not maybe liking some of the things that we're seeing. Are you hearing any of that? Are you seeing any of that from the coaching staff that's there that, I get Claypool hasn't been there, but has the bookwork been enough? Has the work in the wide receiver room been enough? I guess keeping his body, in shape hasn't been enough to this point, but it's soft tissue stuff.
I haven't heard that. I think what they're saying publicly, and they've said it at a number of different turns, that, they're really happy with how he's approaching this offseason. And Justin Fields was like the first one who kind of like pointed that out, and even again today, I'm trying to find the quote on it. Like, he reiterated with Claypool, like, he's really happy that he's had a chance to, get to be around him throughout an off-season program, and not, I know that he hasn't practiced since the first week of OTAs, but when he got to see that part, he felt like he was growing his word tremendously from last year until now. So you got a base at least, like that's that. If you're Justin Fields and you're the Bears offense, you're all right. When he comes back, let's pick up from that. And then, of course, with Darnell Mooney, they're not concerned at all, because that was Fields' guy for the last 2 years. And, his season was cut short by injury, but they are expecting he's back at training camp. I think the thing with Claypool, it's just like, well, what happened? Because soft tissue injuries, like Matt Eberflus pointed that out when asked about Claypool after we didn't see him the second OTA. He said guys are dealing with soft tissue injuries at this time of year, and it's best not to push it if you don't need to. And you don't need to. It's June and May. Like, you don't need to go full out and, potentially get yourself more injured. Fields kind of reiterated that again today too. And I don't think with Claypool, you can rule anything out yet or say, oh man, like, this is really going to fail again his second year here, because we haven't seen it. And they have not said anything to the contrary publicly about how he's been approaching this offseason.
I think the fear is, which cracks me up. Well, I guess not cracks me up, but it is hilarious actually, is that with the Bears, injuries go from like, he's fine, we're just working through some small stuff, to all of a sudden somebody's on IR. Mm-hmm. Like, we've seen that so many times with this team, and especially even under Flush, right, where it was, he's dealing with something day to day, he's dealing with something week to week, and all of a sudden it was, we're probably good, we're gonna set him up for surgery. It's like, surgery?
Yeah, that was the Lucas Patrick thing, like from last year, where you go from day to day, week to week, into wow, this actually is a more serious injury than we thought, and that would be the worst case scenario for Chase Claypool if it was something that kept him out of training camp. And Flus talked about how the timeline right now, they expect it, like where Claypool and Mooney are back at training camp. If there is some sort of setback, though, that's not a good sign, because where the conversation then trends to, this is a very important year for Chase Claypool. He's in a contract year, just like Darnell Mooney, but Chase Claypool was a second-round pick. The Bears traded a second-round pick to get him.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make it look like, wow, what a waste of a pick that ended up becoming, or what a waste of a trade and giving up your second-round pick, which became 32 this year. That was because that's a lot of draft capital to give up for a player you were absolutely anticipating shaking up the room in a good way. And if he doesn't, then there's going to be all the buyer's remorse sort of conversation that comes into play about like how they would have gotten that one wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
Second quarter.
I heard you talking on ESPN today. The connection that DJ Moore and Justin Fields have built, it seems like it's come along a lot quicker than expected, especially with DJ Moore's comments, I believe, first week of OTA, where it literally was like, I mean, we cool, you know what I mean? We're getting it together. We working this thing. It seems like that connection has gone from we're cool to, hey, this is the number one guy. He's the best wide receiver I've ever had in the room. And this is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever had thrown the ball to me. Have you seen that kind of play out to this point in minicamp?
Yeah, what DJ Moore said May 23rd was the connection, the chemistry is a work in progress. And that by the time end of minicamp, you hope it's in a good spot so you can pick it back up in training camp, 2 to 3 days, you'll be on the same page. I feel like they might be a little ahead of schedule. And that's a good spot to be in. When I asked Justin Fields about that, he said, yeah, it has come along quickly. He didn't put any expectations on it. He didn't say, you know, oh, we have to be here by this date, because all receivers are different. But when you have somebody, like, it's a really good thing for Fields, because it's a good thing for DJ Moore, because he gets the same quarterback every single day. No question about who's going to be coming in and out of the starting lineup, who's going to be throwing him the ball, barring injury, because Fields is the guy for 2023. Now we'll see if he's able to be the guy beyond that. But right now, DJ Moore has nothing in question about who his quarterback was. In Carolina, he did. So being able to be effective as a receiver and knowing how to adjust to different quarterbacks, the timing of different quarterbacks on certain routes, and what he needs to do to make himself successful, which in turn makes the offense successful. Like, you have somebody who makes it easy. That makes a quarterback's job easy. And what Fields said, that his body language is easy for him to read, that makes Fields' job easier. So I believe that they're in a really good spot, because the splash plays we see, the big explosive gains. Yesterday, there was the one that was like, it was a deep ball and he was in double coverage with Elijah Hicks and Jalen Johnson flanking both sides of him. He still made, like, there was a thread the needle and just a beautiful over the shoulder catch by DJ Moore. Those are the plays that give you confidence that the passing attack is going to take off. But DJ Moore being very much at the center of that deep ball game is no joke. And that's what the Bears are going to be leaning on to help this offense.
We heard that Justin was pretty dominant today at OTA's final, or I'm sorry, at a minicamp final day. What'd you see? What stood out about how he was throwing the ball that showed he was dominant in the red zone?
Yeah, it's a red zone. Today was truncated because they were like letting guys get out of here early. Yeah. So they were doing a red zone period. And I think it's interesting because, remember, Flus said a couple days ago that, like, you know, when he's asked about, do you want Fields rushing less? And it's like, we don't want to, like, you know, just be like very like intentional, like, oh, we want him to rush for this many yards versus over 1,000. Yeah. It's picking your spots with him. And the red zone's an area where he's going to have to run the ball a lot. And that's okay. Like, that's an area where you're comfortable with it. But today, you know, getting to see him down there throwing the ball. There was a catch as a fade in the end zone to Robert Tonyan, and then Equinemius St. Brown had a touchdown as well during the red zone periods. Like, following up on Justin Fields' accuracy inside the 20, and then again in the low red zone, when those windows to throw are so much tighter because the coverage is so much tighter, and then that part of the field shrinks in actual size, that's where you're going to want to see growth from Fields. And that's what Matt Eberflus said they got to continue to work on, because he has some big bodies that he can utilize down there. Cole Kmet being one of them. On top of that, you know, Tunyan's one of those guys, and even Chase Claypool. So having the ability to have your security blankets down inside the 20 is what he had a couple of years ago with Jimmy Graham when, his rookie year. Cole Kmet was emerged into that player. It really wasn't until like week 7 or 8 last year. But I would, if I were the Bears, I'd walk away feeling pretty confident today going out of minicamp and into the summer that you ended on a good spot, because the offense, this was by far the best day we've seen from the offense in minicamp.
Hey, it's good to hear, especially red zone stuff, because for me, it's like the Bears have been a team for years that can get down to the red zone and just can't get anything done in there. So it's always good to hear, like, you're being successful in the red zone. I do want to ask you, as we get into the second quarter here, outside of Justin Fields, because everything is Justin Fields, everything is DJ Moore. We traded for him. He's our first round pick, blah, blah, blah. Who stood out to you in minicamp offensively? Who was the or collection of guys, whatever it is, that stood out to you offensively that you were like, that's actually going to be a strength for the Chicago Bears heading into training camp?
I don't know if it'll be a strength just yet, because you'd like to think so because of how much added attention the offensive line got. They're not in pads yet. We'll see what they look like against the pass rush, but we're not dealing with the game of musical chairs and a lot of shifting parts up front. That is rare. Usually you have teams, like not just the Bears, but other teams that have personnel changes. And then it's like, I don't know, are they going to try him at center? Are they going to try him at guard? What about, kicking this guy around to different spots? Last year was Tevin Jenkins going from left tackle to right guard in the matter of like 6 weeks. And so you don't have any of that. And you can tell in talking with the offensive line that is a welcomed change, because they all get to focus on one position. And Tevin Jenkins, when I asked him about it yesterday, said that being a left guard, knowing 5 minutes, according to him, 5 minutes after Nate Davis was signed as a free agent, he said that he got the call from Chris Morgan about hey, you're going to switch over to right guard, from right guard to left guard. He's like, okay. Yeah. So it allows him to get good at his craft. That's what he said. And I'm sure it's just like any job, when you're not bouncing around trying to do 2 different things, and you have to on the offensive line, flip your footwork, flip the way your brain is kind of working, from the left side to the right side. He's had weeks now, not just in practice, but in the meeting rooms and everything else before OTAs began, to get it down, to get his footwork down. And now he knows what he needs to work on going into the offseason. So I'll say the offensive line from left to right, we know everyone who's projected to start, they got a top 10 draft pick in Darnell Wright, and they didn't mess around with it. It wasn't, he's got to earn it. From the second he got here, he was a starting right tackle. And that's a good sign for scouting. It's a good sign for the front office that they got it right. And it's a good sign that the coaches have a player that they can work with. And we know they did their due diligence on Darnell Wright because of the workout that they did at the University of Tennessee and how many times they visited with him. It's clearly paying off early that the rookie is not an outlier, because sometimes on the offensive line, you can tell there's a guy that's a little slower than everybody else, or somebody who, might be struggling to block guys. And again, if he does in training camp, I won't be surprised. We have seen this happen. There are a lot of welcome to the NFL moments that rookies have. And I anticipate Darnell Wright's going to have his fair share of them. Nobody comes in as a polished product, but he's up to speed with the rest of the group right now. And leaving minicamp, that seems pretty rare, because you don't, with this group, at least the last couple of years, and the year that I was here last season covering them, they didn't have their offensive line set until midway through training camp, when we saw what the first team unit looked like in the Kansas City game and then the Seattle game. And of course, you got to prepare for injuries. Lucas Patrick got injured the first day of training camp last year. Yeah. So what happens if something like that happens again? Do you have the depth that can help you get through an injury, however long it may be?
And has the relationship with Tevin, it seems like it's a lot smoother this season, right? He talked about going from right guard to left guard, and said he felt like a guard, and he appreciated that they reached out to him and stuff like that. But it feels like, last year, it felt like there was all this tension around Tevin Jenkins being a Bear. And now it feels like, I don't know if everything's kumbaya, but it feels like he's accepting to what the team is trying to do with him. Is that kind of the vibe that you're getting from Tevin?
Yeah, absolutely. He he said he's not living in the past anymore, because last year, even after he switched from tackle to guard, and they were shopping him during training camp, they were calling around seeing, because it was fractured at that point. It's a lot of credit to the player, and it's a lot of credit to the coaches to put fires out to make sure, hey, we got to get through this season together, and you've got to buy into this position because you're going to be vital to what we do. All of that coming together, there's a lot of credit that needs to go around, because that's not easy. And a lot of times, like, players who are disgruntled, that can fracture a room. And when you need pass protection to be at a certain level for a quarterback who tends to hold on to the ball, sometimes a little too long, that's asking a lot if that group isn't solid. And Tevin, I've always enjoyed talking to him. He's one of the more cerebral players that I've covered, and he can really just kind of tell you how he's feeling. He's not afraid to be vulnerable. He's not afraid to be like, yeah, I didn't buy into it. And even last year, after he made the switch from left tackle to guard, he said he still considered himself a tackle, which if you have that mindset and you hold on to that, I mean, of course, like, future earnings for a tackle versus guard, granted, we did see the guard market change the last couple of years in free agency, but nonetheless, tackle's where you make the money. Yeah. Like, if you have that mindset and you're dead set on that, then you're never probably going to reach your potential at the position that they move you to. He said this year, like, he can't live in the past with that. Like, he considers himself a guard. He's had more than a year now at that position, and it's by time that he buys in, and he's doing everything he needs to do. Remember last year when he went to right guard, he was one of the least talked about offensive linemen because he wasn't giving up sacks, and he wasn't, blowing, blocking calls and everything else. Like, he was doing what he needed to do, and in blocking to a really good degree for someone who had switched, midway through the offseason program position. So all signs are good signs with Tevin Jenkins. I think that the fact that this offensive line will be relatively boring because there won't be a whole ton of movement is very exciting internally, because that means there's stability up front. Yes. Field said it didn't really matter to him, but I think it's more so like him putting the onus on himself to make sure that everybody's up to speed, and no matter who is in or out, he'll have the call in and everybody will know it. But I do think that he has to feel pretty good about that, knowing, hey, the 5 in front of me are the 5 that I expect to go into every game with, because there is something to be said about the consistency of a group that is taking the most reps together and understands what each other's assignment's supposed to be, understand what the communication's supposed to be, and then how to compensate if something doesn't go right. Was that you that asked him the Pilates question? I did. I knew it was you. So I remember last year, so after the back injury, remember he had surgery as a rookie? Yeah. He had, this is before I got here, but I remember like reading up on it, like what the recovery was. And then last year, his thing was, like he's talking about like beer and Pilates as part of his, drinking less beer and doing Pilates, which I'm like, that's a great strategy to get fit. And he's made it a point, and it was interesting because Flus actually brought up Pilates today too with Javon Dexter, and the small muscles that that helps strengthen. Like, I'm obviously not like a 310-pound offensive lineman, but it's like those muscles are so important, and you don't, like, with his neck injury, he said that he doesn't like, being able to strengthen the muscles in his neck to make sure it doesn't happen again, where he got the stinger against Philly, thought it was more serious. And then of course his back, that's why Pilates is a huge regimen for him, part of his workout regimen. And same now with Javon Dexter. I wouldn't be surprised if they put Darnell Wright on a similar regimen, because he's 330 something pounds right now. And he said he's probably going to try to get down a little bit, but it's a great workout. It's low impact. And I really, every time I do it, because I love cardio. I love going for a run. I went on, I ran at the lake twice this week. It's great, but doing Pilates and yoga helps you, like, being flexible. It's just like walking around and, not being in pain. And I can only imagine for an NFL player that gets, puts his body through a meat grinder during practice and then during games, to have that ability to strengthen your core, and for Tevin Jenkins to make sure that all of the muscles that he's had some issues with are at a place where he feels that they're strong, that yields a more confident player.
I just loved his face when you were like, are you using a reformer or a super reformer? He was like, a what?
So the Cadillac, the thing that he's talking about, if you Google like because where I go, they have like reformer classes, they've got athletic reformer classes, they've got super reformer classes. Like it just means like the basic reformer is the one that doesn't have like the bars that hang up from it, where it's like you're pulling ropes more or less, like into like, it's for a lot of core exercises. It has the bed is what they call it, and you put your feet on it. You can put the springs at different like strength levels. There's like red, mine is red, yellow, and blue. But it's like the Cadillac is one. Like I remember seeing Anthony Barr post on his Instagram, former Vikings linebacker who I covered, like how intense his Pilates workouts are. He works out with somebody who does a lot of NFL players during the offseason.
Yeah.
And some of it look like they speed up the video so you can kind of see, because it is slow and deliberate because you're training muscles. But as you watch him go through it, it's like, man, like you got to be really flexible. And think about someone at Tevin Jenkins' size, like going through the Cadillac. I tell you, Google it, because it's like a contraption. And it's huge. Like it's much bigger than like the reformer that I use. But I know that it's a good workout because I've done it, but that's probably like the one physical thing I have in common with an NFL player.
I mean, listen, you're doing good things out here. You and Tevin Jenkins.
Just trying to strengthen our core.
That's all it is. That's all I need to do mine, man. Because I need to get on his plan. Less beer. But it's so good. It's so good. My God. Somebody was like, oh, just drink hard liquor. And I was like, who wants to do that every day? All right, I'll do that too. No.
Beer puts you, I don't know. I've like definitely like gotten off the beer train because I feel like in summertime, it's so heavy, but then there's so many different places brewery wise I want to try in Chicago this summer. And I'm like, I gotta make sure that I save my calories. On the Pilates day, I'll go out for beer. That'll be the day that I can drink my calories.
This thing looks terrifying.
The Cadillac,
I just looked this up. Let me see if I can add this in to the pit. This looks like we should not be able to show this on the show.
Some sort of I know that is intense. So the thing on the bottom, do you see this, like where the straps are? And then like you put your feet in there and that creates resistance. Like sometimes when you're like doing the exercise, it's like, oh, I feel pretty good. And it creates resistance. So you're like strengthening your hamstrings, and then you can like flip your body around and do it the other way. And when you do like when you put your legs in the straps, and I can only imagine what it's like for an NFL player at their size, when you're doing like the butterfly with your legs, like that's supposed to strengthen your quads, your hamstrings and other parts of your legs. Like it's really intense, but low intensity. Like you're not like out of breath, but it's like, golly, that hurts.
That thing, I'll let everybody in the comments. If you're listening on the podcast side, go over to the YouTube to see what that thing looks like, or Google it. I mean, it looks like something Zion Williamson would be into. But as we're keeping this thing moving along, Courtney, we are at halftime. Halftime, favorite time of the day, as always, because Courtney usually brings us pretty good nuggets. Courtney, halftime is here. What do you have for us?
So Justin Fields let us know that he's going to France. Deshaun Watson, and Jordan Love are planning to leave tomorrow. And then they go there. I think he said like a week, 10 days. They're doing a youth football camp overseas. It's neat. Like, I don't know why France was a destination, but that's the first time for Fields that he will have ever been outside the country. And I was trying to like do the math in my head. Said, okay, like this is basically his vacation, right? Going over there, doing football, because by the time he gets back, he's in training mode. And it's not, he'll eventually start building in, all right, this week I got to start running. This week, towards mid-July, he said he's going to have receivers, tight ends, running backs, whoever he can down to Florida to train. And we know that Khalil Herbert was down there with him for a little bit earlier this offseason. Khalil is a South Florida native, so I imagine that's probably where he'll end up being again. But the 5 weeks just feel like they go so quickly, because they do. Because if you have your time booked up, and Fields clearly does, you'll blink and it's training camp. But I thought it was neat that he's going to, the NFL's had a big global ambassador sort of initiative with the flag football stuff, and then, taking football overseas. as part of like some of the programs that they're doing. And this is a neat one. I'm excited to see like what his experience is like going over there and, being able to spread football to a different place that, has a different football. In France, obviously, PSG is like their big football team over there, but it's not American football.
As a Bears fan, should I feel good that the Bears quarterback and the Packers quarterback seem to be really, really close? Like, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, Jordan Love's been working out with Justin Fields for what, 3-4 years now, pretty much. I think him, Deshaun.
Yeah, the David Mulligetta.
The same, yeah.
David Mulligetta represents all of them. So they like a lot of times, I believe it's down in Texas somewhere where they've trained. I think CJ Stroud has been, and we've seen photos of a lot of them during the offseason. When CJ was still at Ohio State, he was training with Watson and with Fields. But there's probably some marketing deal. They're probably getting paid a nice check to go over there and do it. But even though they're like off, they're still not off. It's still football. It's amazing how these guys really don't get much time to go and kick back and do nothing that relates to football. Because even in like, February, March, April, they're training. They're here. They're not here because they're training somewhere else. And then the amount of recovery stuff you have to do for your body. Trying to remember who it was. I think Eddie Jackson, it was him, like talking about like his foot, the Liz Frank and working here with the doctors, working with his doctor, Dr. Mike, back down in, either Florida or Alabama. Like these guys have so much on their plate just to stay in shape, just to make sure that they are at a physical level. So when comes time to compete, there's no drop off. And Fields is no different. Like, fortunately, there's no injuries that he's dealing with, but like his time is so limited where training is your whole off season. People think they like leave now and then they come back and it's like, oh man, they've had 5 weeks off. Like, yes, there's a little time off and you'll see guys' Instagrams, they go on fun vacations and really expensive trips. And I really am curious to see what he thinks about, the food in France, the culture, and whether the NFL could be sustainable over there, because we know the NFL is, made England a priority. They have made Germany a priority. Will France be next? You can ask Justin Fields when he gets back what he thinks. Like, what's the reception of American football over there?
I think you would have to have I've thought about this a lot, and it's you can't have like what Jacksonville wants to do, where they move over there and teams are flying over to play them. I don't think that that's possible. But I do think that you could probably start to have like countries with their own version of the NFL, kind of like how soccer is, where there's the EPL, there's I don't know all the leagues, I'm not going to act like I do. Bundesliga, all of that, and then at the end of the day there's a World Cup that everybody competes in. I think I could see American football getting to that point. I don't think I'll ever see it where there's a sustainable team that comes over here to play, because it doesn't make, nobody's gonna fly over there to play you once a year. And
unless it's a novelty game, like what the Chiefs are doing this year and the couple other teams that are going to Germany and in England. Like I've never felt like that Jacksonville idea is a sustainable one, because it's such a disadvantage for Jacksonville to constantly have to be in the United States. And how do you attract free agents to a foreign country when the majority of your free agents live here? I think that's a really hard sell.
Even with, listen, the difference in the dollar is a whole different conversation, but like,
look at our debt ceiling. Like that's go ahead and like, that could be like the number one reason it's not going to work out. If the US dollar ends up like, torpedoing, and then, that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing, but I don't see it happening. Let's keep this thing moving along. No, let's get into the third quarter, Courtney. Because we talked about our biggest takeaways from the offensive side. Minicamp. We saw the defense. We've heard so much about all the holds, but we've also heard that the defense is making quite a few plays. I think people forget at this point, because of how much we want Justin to be good. We want the running game to be good. We want the wide receivers to be good. The defense also plays for us.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about the defense in minicamp and OTAs? What's standing out to you about any specific players or units over there?
The defense is always ahead of the offense at this time of year because the offense isn't scheming for what the defense's coverages are going to be. They're not scheming for a pass rush and certain moves that everything's like very much like in the vanilla stages.
Yeah.
The offense is just trying to get together, focusing on themselves, while the defense focuses on itself. So when you see more plays happening on the defensive side of the ball in OTAs and in minicamp, it leads you to believe, okay, they've got the right personnel in there. We've heard about like some of the new additions and how well they've, adapted to this culture and the leadership. I mean, Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards are going to be, part of the heart and soul of this defense, which is great for two free agents coming in that they can get in that quickly. But the other names that stand out, DeMarcus Walker now going into year 7 and what he's going to provide for this team, the inside-outside versatility, I think is so important because that's something, if the Bears don't end up getting any name that can really make a big impact from, the pass rush from the edge, he might be like your big player that you're relying on. So right. I don't know what'll happen with that in the next couple of weeks. Matt Eberflus left the door open to it, but as it stands right now, until they get in pads, it will be hard to tell. Will you have guys making business decisions on run plays? Will you have blown coverages? How will a lack of a pass rush, at least what we expect it to look like, unless there's improvements, how will that affect the back end of the defense? Because you don't want Jaquan Brisker leading the team in sacks again. As cool as that was, you don't want that. But
yeah,
DeMarcus Walker, the two linebackers, Tyreek Stevenson, some of the new names that have really stood out during training camp are ones that you anticipate playing sizable roles from the jump this season. And that's good that the ones you expect are the ones doing the work and standing out.
Yeah, I mean, I love that I'm hearing about Jaquan Brisker intercepting the football. You know what I mean? I would like it to not come off of Justin Fields, but I mean, realistically, he knows it's passing downs. He's out there to make plays, and I like that we're still hearing his name a lot. I mean, he was a guy to me that I thought could have been, defensive rookie of the year in the running. Now, of course, he wasn't going to win it, but I thought that he really stood out for us. And I mean, even hearing about Kyler Gordon, how he's settling into the slot. I mean, what have you seen from him at minicamp? Was he still kind of showing those flashes that he showed in OTAs?
Yeah, the last week, or no, it was earlier this week, the interception he had, he was in the right position. I think for him being in the slot, getting the focus in on that one spot will be critical to his growth because he was tasked with doing so much. Last time this year, what is it? Last year at this time, he was I just remember it's all right, well, where's he playing? Oh, we're going to cross train him at both. I understand the need to do it and to play, the traditional cornerback spot where you've got the boundary and you're opposite Jalen Johnson is important, but it's too much. He was, sometimes having to play both positions, actually all the time, having to play both positions in the same game. And there will be an injury need for that, of course, but allowing him to zero in on one place, one position will be really beneficial for Kyler Gordon moving forward. And I look at that secondary and it feels way more solidified this year going into camp than last year going into training camp.
Right.
We didn't know about Eddie Jackson bouncing back. He's back out there right now. He's, playing through all the rehab that he's had to do to his Liz Frank injury. And it's a great sign to see him out there. We knew that Jaquan Brisker had a high ceiling. You really didn't know, okay, well, what is he going to look like with Eddie Jackson? Is that mix going to work? Clearly it did. And then now you have your cornerback spot set. This is so different. This is a different feel about this team than last year from offense to the defense because you don't have positions that are totally in flux. If we had to name the starting corners today, you could do it. You can name a lot of positions on the defense that have starters today, and that's a good spot to be in.
When we look at this defensive line, I think that's where a lot of Bears fans' concern comes on the defensive end. But we've heard some names, kind of showing themselves out. DeMarcus Walker a little bit standing out as a leader. Even Terrell Lewis, who we heard that he was basically destroying Darnell Wright the other day, which is, at this point, okay, cool. let's improve on it. But is there somebody like that who, right, a Terrell Lewis or, somebody who's maybe that fringe guy that was brought in just to be competitive that you're like, okay, I could see him being a real asset to the Chicago Bears?
It's a good question. Noah Sewell is where I'll go with that, because we know that Jack Sanborn's injured. He's still coming back with the ankle injury. I saw him walking around during minicamp. He doesn't have any noticeable brace, anything on his ankle, left one that got injured. So how soon he's going to come back, I think training camp is the window that they're looking at. But you want to see him out there at some point. There's so much promise about him coming off a really good rookie season until the time he got hurt. But Noah Sewell stepped into that role when they're in base, and who knows, he could be, pushing Jack Sanborn for playing at that spot. Now, we have not seen Sanborn because of the injury, but when he comes back, more depth at linebacker never hurts. And I really am impressed with how quickly Noah Sewell, he was a 5-star recruit, 4 or 5-star recruit at one point. Very clearly he's a very good football player. So the fact that he's getting some good size number of reps with the ones is a big thing right now. Is there a feeling that Jack Sanborn still has this number 1 spot right now, or is there Noah Sewell might actually be taking this spot? What's the vibe around him? Because he's a player. When I watched him in college, I was like, this dude, you could tell he's Panay's brother, first off, because I was like, he could be a pass rusher if he really wanted to have his hand in the dirt. A lot of the moves he did to get around defensive linemen, I was like, he could actually be a pass rusher. Yeah, it's funny because I remember asking him about that, during rookie camp. I was like, do you ever play on the offensive line? Because obviously size difference is one thing, but it's no, that was never his thing. And to have that pedigree in your bloodline, he's had family members play in the NFL. Obviously, his brother was a first-round pick by the Lions a couple of years ago. It's his intelligence, I think, is part of the reason why he's able to get so many early reps with the first-team defense. And whether that means Jack Sanborn, I'm not saying at all Jack Sanborn's on borrowed time or anything like that, but this is a good development in terms of, hey, you got somebody behind you who's pushing you potentially for your spot. You got to get out there when you're healthy and prove that you deserve the spot still. That's never a bad thing to have extra competition. Now, how people react to competition, how people perform when their jobs are potentially going to be taken over by somebody else, that is something that you have to consider. But I think it's a great spot for this defense to be in. And especially with Noah Sewell as a day 3 draft pick, able to come in early on and earn significant playing time. Now, the other player that I know Flu said that he kind of wanted to see a little bit more was Terrell Smith, the cornerback from Minnesota. He's been injured during minicamp. So, but despite him being a 6th-round draft pick, the team's really excited about him. And more depth at corner never hurts. I remember Mike Zimmer, the coach of Minnesota Vikings, always said his theory was just one more corner, just one more. You got to have one more, because when you feel like you have enough, that's when an injury happens. That's when your depth gets tested. So how he looks at training camp and whether he can, kind of play his way onto this roster into a depth role, see what he does in special teams. I'm excited to see what that one looks like too.
Let's keep this moving, because you started talking about the rookies.
Fourth quarter.
Let's get to the fourth quarter, because I think the rookie development is something that maybe we didn't hear as much about. We've heard that people are just kind of playing well, right? But has there been anybody, the offensive side, of course, Darnell Wright's the main guy that a lot of people are wondering about, but how they talked about Roschon and us basically not hearing anything about Roschon. What's going on with the offensive rookies, Roschon, Tyler Scott, Darnell Wright? What are you seeing from them as far as their development to this point?
Well, Darnell Wright's a starter. We know that. That's a great sign, and they don't overthink it. He's going to be playing right tackle. They spent a top 10 pick on him. He should be. Tyler Scott's worked his way in. He's gotten reps, with the second team offense pretty consistently. Punt return could be a job for him too. He's been competing there during minicamp. And then one other is Roschon. Like a lot of buzz about him when he was coming in as a rookie, pillar of, this team potentially before he ever like actually got in the building. And today, Matt Eberflus had mentioned when he just asked kind of a general thing, who's maybe stood out a little bit like under the radar, which guys are you looking forward to seeing, like, the roster sleepers more or less.
Right.
Roschon Johnson could be contending for the top running back spot on this team. It's impossible to tell right now when guys are not in pads.
Right.
It's a position that you have to, see what pass protection looks like. How do they handle a blitz pickup? Like, what do you have 3 down backs in this roster? I believe they do, guys who are capable of it. But like, what role is everybody going to fulfill if you don't have somebody who goes into that role? And chances are, like, more times than not, a lot of NFL teams, they use a stable versus like your 3 down rusher.
Yeah.
Like, so Roschon Johnson, they clearly saw a lot of those capabilities of him and the potential there when he was at Texas. What does that look like for him coming up during training camp? I would imagine he's going to push Khalil Herbert, who is the leader in the room right now. And I wrote about this last week. This is exactly what David Walker, the running backs coach, had projected would be the case for the running back room.
Right.
Khalil Herbert gets all the 1 reps, like, and even like during OTAs and minicamp, you see it, not just with like, the individual stuff, but during team and 7 on 7 and 11 on 11, he's getting the first crack at everything with Justin Fields. That's the case right now. Does it mean it's always going to be the case in training camp? No. Like all bets are off. Deontay Foreman is going to be in there. Roschon Johnson's going to have a chance to really do a lot in this offense. So I think, as far as like an under the radar guy to watch, I mean, there was so much made about him that he didn't really feel under the radar, but haven't seen a whole ton just because you're not seeing much from the running back group right now because it's just not the time for that. But I would put my money on Roschon Johnson being like the guy who quickly escalates himself to a very prominent role in this offense.
I said there's going to be one time in training camp where somebody goes out the block and it's going to be the Khalil Herbert or Deontay Foreman. They're going to be like, Justin would have died on that play. Roschon, get in there. Please.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got to be able to help in pass protection.
Yeah.
Like being a 3 down back, the rule, it's not just running the football and running it hard. It's catching passes. It's being, part of pass protection, doing whatever is required of you to stay on the field for multiple downs. It's literally in the title of the position. But I am also wondering what Roschon Johnson's special teams responsibilities are going to be, because if he's playing a lot on offense, they cannot use him as much on special teams. Just how they have to roll with it. So how early on do we see that? That's one of those storylines that we're going to be looking at going into training camp, like top 3. Did they sign an edge rusher? What is the running back room? What is it going to look like? And then, of course, Fields and DJ Moore, and then Fields and how quickly can Justin Fields build the chemistry he built with DJ Moore with Chase Claypool?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you look at the defensive side of the football, I feel like we didn't hear a lot about Javon Dexter or Zach Pickens. Not bad either, right? Like maybe they're just doing their job, but I feel like we didn't hear a ton about them coming out on the defensive line. What are you seeing from both of them? I heard Flus talking about, him going from a 2-gap system to a penetrating style. Is it been, steady improvement from OTAs, or what are you seeing there?
Tevin Jenkins said yesterday, like when he just asked about the 2 rookies, because he's seeing a lot of them in practice. Justin Jones, as they say, is their 3 technique right now, but we'll see what the combination looks like. They could just choose to rotate guys in and out a lot because you want to be fresh. And, it's good problem to have, a numbers game. But he said very good hand usage out of both of them. And they know how to set up inside and outside moves. So when you have 2 rookies that are coming in, a 2nd and a 3rd round pick, who are talented in their own right, can do a lot of the same things, but can be used in different ways in this defense. It's good for depth, but it also shows you that you hit on your draft picks. With Javon Dexter, I want to see what it looks like when he's able to actually rush the passer, because he was 2-gapping at Florida, which Matt Eberflus talked about today. And, he doesn't have he's moving with the offensive lineman, not moving see ball, get ball. That's what he's going to get to do now. See the quarterback, go hit the quarterback. And I know I have the stats somewhere. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was something like among SEC players in the last 2 seasons, he generated the most pressures out of the 3 technique position. I think it was 12 in total. And how do you turn those pressures into quarterback hits and then sacks? That's what it's going to be. That's what's going to be his biggest focus. In learning how to, it might not come in training camp. Certainly it will take a while, but that's like the overarching goal for him this year. And then with Zach Pickens, where does he fit? I mean, where does he fit? Like he's got competition in front of him. Both can play the shade and can play the 3 technique, but like, where does he fit in this defense when they do have depth? And that's a good problem to have if you're Matt Eberflus, because other areas of your pass rush are lacking and they've kind of built theirs from the inside out. Maybe they're onto something with it. Maybe it'll expose that they really need to go get an edge rusher somewhere, somehow. And if they may have to trade for one, which I think Poles was on with Bleck and Abdallah, and he said that they're not ruling out anything. Signing a guy as a free agent, trading for somebody. And there are some names available. I mean, we bring up, Chase Young during the offseason. We'll see if it doesn't work out in Washington, when do the trade talks start to pick up? What about Danielle Hunter in Minnesota? I mean, he didn't show up for minicamp. They're shopping him. So what does that look like?
It's one of those situations now where even when Poles says, right, it's a sooner or later thing, hopefully a sooner than later type of thing. That tells me that something is coming. But I mean, when do you think that we would even start to see that, coming down the pipeline where the Bears may be looking to sign somebody? Because we haven't even heard rumblings that the Bears are, talking to anybody about possibly signing here.
I would say closer to training camp because there are a couple guys that are still free agents. I know we've mentioned Unique Ngakoue a lot. Like, what are they looking for? What are they looking to get paid? And are they trying to drum up a market for themselves that may not be, as strong right now? Once you get closer to training camps, like, man, we got to get somebody in here. That's when deals usually get struck. It's very like June and early July and mid-July. That's the time for extensions by, across the NFL. We've seen that, but that's the other thing. Signing another player, maybe an edge rusher. And then what do they do with Jalen Johnson? What do they do with Cole Kmet? The guys that are eligible for extensions this offseason, does it happen in the next couple of weeks? Does it happen, when does it happen potentially? Those are like, it's not going to be like that quiet of an offseason from a front office standpoint, because they still got work to do to re-sign potentially some of their own guys and add to the roster.
Was there anybody they saw that maybe made them feel better about, maybe we don't have to go out and sign
I'd say DeMarcus Walker. DeMarcus Walker, like what he provides this team, but you can't be the only one. Yeah. You didn't hear much about Dominique Robinson or Travis Gibson this offseason. So I think that's a big sign that you need to sign somebody. At all.
Let's hope they do something. I guess that's our only real concern. But hey, we do want to know how you guys feel in the comments below. Drop that on the YouTube side if you're listening on the podcast. I appreciate you for always showing love. This is another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast. For Courtney Cronin, I am Pat the Designer. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with Yurko in the building. As always, y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.